The rejected princess. In a faraway galaxy, there lived a princess named Alara. She wasn't like other royals who were admired by their people. Alara had been born blind and with a disability that kept her from walking easily. Her world was different from anyone else's. Instead of hearing cheers and feeling the warmth of the people's admiration, she heard whispers, soft but cutting. She could feel their eyes on her, the pity, the disappointment. The people of her planet, Valara, believed in strength, strength to rule, strength to fight, strength to survive, and Alara, in their eyes, had none of that for as long as she could. Remember, Alara had been alone. Her condition made her seem weak, and in her society, weakness was something to be rejected. The palace, once a place of comfort, now felt more like a prison. Alara spent most of her days in the quiet corners of the grand palace. She would wander through the halls, relying on her other senses, her hearing, her sense of smell, and the vibrations beneath her feet. She could hear the distant sounds of the bustling courtiers, but no one came to her. No one spoke to her, no one seemed to care. But there was one person who, despite the rumors and the whispers, would always remain by her side, her guardian. Talon had been assigned to her since birth. Talon was kind, but even he couldn't hide the sorrow in his eyes when he looked at her. He had tried to make her feel like she wasn't different, like she could be strong, but even he knew the truth. The princess was rejected by her own people. One evening, Alara sat alone in her chamber. A soft light casting shadows on the walls. The air was cool, and the faint sound of the wind could be heard through the window. Alara ran her fingers along the intricate carvings on the wall, something she had done countless times before. The palace was full of beauty, but none of it reached her heart. She couldn't see it, and the loneliness seemed to drown out every other sensation. She heard Talon approach, his footsteps slow and heavy, like he was carrying a burden. He entered the room and stopped just behind her, knowing that she was aware of his presence. "Your Highness," Talon said softly, his voice gentle. "The council wishes to speak with you. It's important." Alara didn't turn around. She could already feel the tension in his voice, the reluctance. He didn't want her to go, but duty called. She could feel the heaviness of the moment, the pressure that came with the role she was meant to play. "I know what they will say," Alara replied quietly. "They will tell me that I am not fit to rule. They will remind me of my weakness, and then they will look at me with pity." Talon didn't answer right away. Instead, he moved closer and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Your Highness, you are more than they think. You are more than what they see." But Alara wasn't sure she believed him anymore. The truth was, no one had ever looked at her as if she was capable of anything. Even Talon, the one person who had always been by her side, couldn't deny the truth. She wasn't like other princesses. She couldn't see, and she couldn't walk with ease. She didn't have the strength that her people admired. How could she lead a planet when she couldn't even lead herself? "I will go," Alara said, her voice soft but firm. "I have to face them. I have to face what they believe of me." Talon didn't protest. He knew she was right. She had to go, if only to show that she was still the princess, the heir to the throne. But as they walked together to the council chambers, Alara couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting would be like all the others. She would stand before them, speak of her intentions, and leave with nothing but the weight of their doubt on her shoulders. As they reached the large council room, Alara could hear the murmurs of the members already gathered. They were talking about her. She knew. They were wondering how long it would take before she realized that she could never rule. The doors opened and Alara stepped inside, Talon by her side. She could feel the eyes of the council on her, but she refused to let it break her. She would face this, just as she had faced everything else in her life, with strength, though not the kind they wanted, but the kind she had always had to rely on, the strength to endure. The council's leader, a tall alien with sharp features named Lord Rail, spoke first. His voice was deep, like the rumble of thunder before a storm. "Princess Alara," he began, his tone formal, "you know why we've called this meeting. Your condition, your blindness, and your disability makes you unfit to rule Valara. We cannot have a leader who cannot see, who cannot stand tall." Alara felt the weight of his words hit her like a physical blow. She knew what he was going to say, but hearing it aloud was different. The rejection stung more than she cared to admit. She gripped the edge of the chair in front of her, her fingers digging into the soft fabric. She could feel her heart race in her chest, but she remained still. "I am still your princess," Alara said, her voice steady despite the emotion rising within her. "I may not be like the others, but I am still worthy of this throne. I may not lead with strength in the way you think, but I lead with determination, with hope." The council was silent for a moment, but Alara knew their minds were already made up. They didn't believe in her. They never had. She wasn't like the others, and maybe, in their eyes, that was a reason to cast her aside. Talon stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "She is worthy," he said quietly. "Don't underestimate her." But the council was unmoved. The princess, it seemed, would always be alone in her fight for recognition. As Alara left the council chambers, she didn't feel the weight of victory or defeat, she felt the weight of her reality. She had been rejected once again, but deep inside, something stirred. She wasn't finished yet. And one day, they would see her for who she truly was, not for her blindness, not for her disability, but for her strength to keep going, even when the whole world turned away. And maybe, just maybe, there was someone out there who would see her as she was, worthy of love, worthy of respect, and that was enough for her to hold on. The first encounter, night following the council meeting, felt longer than usual for Princess Alara. The walls of her chamber, once her sanctuary, now seemed to close in on her, echoing the rejection she had just endured. She could hear the faint sounds of the palace, the rustling of the wind against the large windows, and the distant voices of the courtiers, but there was no warmth in the air, no comfort in the silence. It was as if the very essence of the palace had turned cold in her heart. Alara sat by the window, her hands resting on the cool surface of the stone. She had always liked the view, even if she couldn't see it. The stars, the planets, the endless expanse of the galaxy. It had always reminded her that there was more to the universe than just the cruel walls of Valara and the judgment of her people. Still, tonight, she felt disconnected, as if the stars themselves were too far to touch. Her mind kept replaying Lord Rael's words, unfit to rule, cannot stand tall. Those words echoed endlessly in her mind, digging deeper with each passing second. She had fought so long to prove herself, to show that she was more than her disabilities, more than the pity that everyone else seemed to see in her. But no matter how hard she tried, it always felt like the world was reminding her that she didn't belong. Just as she was about to lose herself in the familiar spiral of doubt, she heard a soft knock at the door. Enter, she called, her voice quiet but steady. The door creaked open and Alara felt a presence in the room. But it wasn't like the others. It wasn't filled with the usual pity or judgment. Instead, it was curious. A voice, low but calm, reached her ears. Your Highness, I've been assigned to assist you. Alara turned slightly toward the sound, listening intently. She didn't know who this person was, but there was something different in the tone of their voice. They weren't here to pity her, and they didn't seem afraid of her disabilities. In fact, there was an openness she hadn't encountered before. Who are you? Alara asked, her curiosity piqued. I wasn't expecting any new staff. I am Alex. The voice replied, I'm a human from the Earth colony. I've been tasked with helping you navigate the palace and whatever else you may need. Human. Alara repeated, her mind trying to process the strange introduction. Valara was home to many different species, but humans were rare. Why has a human been sent to me? Alex hesitated for a moment before answering. I believe they think you need someone who understands what it's like to be an outsider. A person who won't judge you because of your condition. Alara's mind raced. Could it be? Could someone actually see her as something more than her blindness, more than her disability? The thought was foreign, but it ignited a tiny spark of hope deep within her chest. You don't look scared, Alara said, a small laugh escaping her lips. Everyone else looks at me like I'm broken. Why are you so different? Alex stepped closer and Alara could feel the warmth of his presence. But it wasn't overbearing or intrusive. He seemed to understand the unspoken boundaries she had set. I don't see you as broken, he said softly. I see you as someone who's been given a difficult path, but that doesn't mean you can't walk it. I don't know your struggles, Your Highness, but I know that strength comes in many forms. Alara was silent for a long moment. No one had ever spoken to her this way, like she was more than just her struggles. It was a strange feeling, one she wasn't sure how to process. I appreciate your kind words, Alex, Alara said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I'm not sure I believe in strength anymore, not after what the council said. After all the years of being rejected, I've learned to accept that maybe I'm just not cut out for this. She heard a soft shift in Alex's posture, a subtle movement that suggested he was deep in thought. Then his voice broke the silence again, this time more firmly. Strength isn't about being perfect. It's about continuing, even when the world tells you to stop, and you're still here, still fighting. That's strength, whether anyone else sees it or not. Alara blinked, taken aback by his words. She had never thought of it that way. She had always believed that strength was about overcoming her limitations, about being more like the others. But now, a small part of her was starting to realize that perhaps her strength was not in being like everyone else, but in being herself. A silence fell between them, comfortable yet full of unspoken emotions. Finally, Alara broke it, her voice tinged with vulnerability. Maybe you're right, Alex. Maybe I need to stop listening to everyone else and start listening to myself. But it's hard, so hard, when all I've ever known is rejection. Alex's voice softened. I understand, but you don't have to face it alone. I'm here to help, and maybe, together, we can find a way to make your journey easier. Alara smiled for the first time in what felt like forever, though the gesture was faint. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I don't know if I can ever repay you, but I appreciate this more than you know." From that moment on, something began to shift within Alara. She wasn't sure what it was, but Alex's words had planted a seed of hope that she hadn't felt in years. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to her than the limitations others saw. Maybe she was more than the princess who had been rejected. Maybe she could be the leader her people needed, not in spite of her differences, but because of them. And so, in the quiet of her room, with a human by her side who believed in her when no one else did, Alara felt a new spark of determination flicker to life. The path ahead would be difficult, but for the first time, she didn't feel like she was walking it alone. The journey of the rejected princess had just begun. And with Alex by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. The unlikely connection. The following days in the palace were quieter than usual. Alara's thoughts remained restless, but there was a sense of calm that hadn't been there before. Alex's presence in her life had brought something new and understanding, a subtle reassurance that she wasn't alone. For the first time, someone seemed genuinely interested in helping her, not out of duty or pity, but out of a desire to see her succeed. Each morning, Alex arrived promptly, as though he had made it his personal mission to help Alara navigate her world. He would guide her through the palace gardens, teaching her to use the vibrations of the ground to sense the environment around her. With every step, Alara learned something new, something that, at one point, she had thought impossible. The bright colors of the flowers and the warmth of the sun could never be fully known to her, but she had learned to appreciate them through Alex's careful descriptions, through his voice that described the softness of petals, the coolness of the breeze, and the hum of the palace's fountains. But it wasn't just the physical world that Alex opened up to her, it was the world of companionship, too. Slowly, cautiously, Alara began to feel something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years: trust. One afternoon, as they strolled through the garden, a quiet conversation unfolded between them. "You know," Alex began, breaking the silence, "I've never met anyone quite like you." Alara tilted her head slightly, her curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Alex hesitated for a moment, as though carefully choosing his words. "Most people, they wouldn't want to deal with someone like me. I'm different, a human on a foreign planet, working in the palace of a royal family. I guess I've always been the outsider, but with you, it doesn't feel that way. You don't judge me for what I am, and I don't judge you for what you are either." Alara's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she couldn't respond. She had never had someone speak to her this way. Most people had only seen her blindness, her disability, as something to pity or avoid. They had never looked beyond that. "I suppose I've always felt like an outsider too," Alara said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Everyone expects me to be perfect, to be like the other royals, but I'm not. I'm broken." In their eyes, Alex stopped walking, turning to face her. His expression was earnest, his eyes filled with sincerity. "Alara, you're not broken. You're strong. The way you've faced everything that's been thrown at you, no one else could do that. Strength doesn't always come from what we see on the outside, it comes from what's inside. From how we keep going even when it's hard." Alara felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. The simple truth of them seemed to melt the walls she had built around her heart. She had always believed that strength was something you could see in others, something that had to be displayed outwardly. But Alex was showing her something different. True strength wasn't about what others saw. It was about the courage to keep going, even when the world didn't believe in you. For the first time in her life, Alara felt seen, not as the blind and disabled princess, but as a person worthy of trust, worthy of love. Over the next few weeks, their bond deepened. Alex became more than just a guide, he became her friend. She began to look forward to their walks in the gardens, their quiet conversations, and the moments of silence where they could simply exist together. But their connection wasn't without its challenges. The palace staff, though polite, began to notice the growing closeness between the princess and the human. Whispers started to spread again, and Alara couldn't help but feel the weight of their disapproval. One afternoon, while she and Alex were walking through the palace corridors, she could hear the hushed voices of the courtiers ahead. They saw her first and immediately fell silent, but Alara could still sense their judgment. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her voice quiet, but tinged with the familiar bitterness of rejection. "They're whispering about me again, about you." Alex frowned, his jaw tightening. "Let them whisper," he said, his voice firm. "They don't know you. They don't know what it's like to walk in your shoes." Alara smiled softly, touched by his words. But she couldn't deny the lingering doubts in her mind. She had spent her whole life living in the shadow of others' opinions. The whispers stung, even if she tried to ignore them. "It doesn't matter," she said, her voice more resolute than before. "I've learned not to care about what others think. But sometimes it's hard not to. Alex stopped in his tracks, turning to face her fully. I know it's hard. But you don't have to carry that weight alone anymore. I'm here, and I believe in you. You should. Too. Alara felt a lump form in her throat at his words. He truly believed in her, and somehow, for the first time, she found it possible to believe in herself. As the days passed, Alara continued to grow stronger, not just physically, but emotionally. She began to take more active steps in her role as the princess. Alex helped her with the preparations for an upcoming royal event, one where she would be expected to make a public appearance. The thought terrified her, but she knew she couldn't hide forever. The evening of the event arrived, and Alara stood before a full-length mirror in her chamber. Alex was by her side, adjusting her gown, ensuring that everything was perfect. Her hands trembled slightly, but she steadied herself, taking a deep breath. You look amazing, Alex said, his voice filled with admiration. Alara smiled, her heart racing. Thank you, Alex. I don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to try. You don't need to be perfect, Alex said, his tone reassuring. You just need to be you. And in that moment, Alara realized that maybe that was all she had ever needed, to be herself, to show the world who she truly was: strong, capable, and worthy of being seen. She wasn't broken, and she wasn't alone anymore. As they made their way to the event, Alara walked with a newfound confidence, her hand resting lightly on Alex's arm. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the weight of the world crushing her. She felt light, free, and ready to face whatever came next. The secret threat, the grand hall of the palace, was alive with activity. Lights shining brightly from chandeliers above, casting a soft glow on the richly decorated walls. Alara stood at the entrance, her heart pounding in her chest as she took in the sight of the dignitaries, the courtiers, and the leaders of her people, all watching her every move. They had all gathered for the royal ball, a momentous occasion meant to celebrate Valara's prosperity, but for Alara it felt more like a trial. Her heart raced, and for a moment she felt the familiar weight of doubt settle in her chest. The whispers from the palace staff had followed her here. Some were intrigued by her newfound confidence, while others still looked upon her with pity. The council members, who had once rejected her as unfit to lead, watched her carefully, their gazes sharp and calculating. You're doing fine, Alex whispered from beside her, his voice a steady reassurance in the midst of her nervousness. Just remember, you belong here. You belong. Alara smiled faintly, grateful for his presence. She had never felt more unsure in her life. But Alex's unwavering support had started to make her believe that maybe, just maybe, she could do this. Maybe she could prove them all wrong. But just as she was about to step forward, the air around her seemed to grow tense, charged with an unspoken presence. Her senses heightened, and she noticed a group of dignitaries gathered in the far corner of the room, their faces unusually serious. A dark figure stood among them, watching her from a distance. A chill ran down her spine. She didn't know who he was, but there was something unmistakably off about him. His eyes, hidden beneath a hood, were fixed on her, and she could feel a strange sense of foreboding building within her. The figure didn't move, but the intensity of his gaze made her stomach tighten. Alex noticed her unease. Alara, what's wrong? Alara shook her head, trying to focus. There's someone watching us, over there, in the corner. She gestured subtly toward the figure. But before Alex could react, the stranger turned and vanished into the crowd, blending into the shadows. Who was that? Alex asked, his eyes narrowing with concern. I don't know, Alara replied, her voice tight, but I have a feeling that something isn't right. The rest of the evening passed in a blur for Alara. Every moment felt heightened, as though she were walking through a dream, constantly looking over her shoulder. The stranger's presence haunted her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As the ball came to an end, Alara and Alex made their way back to her private quarters. Alara's mind raced, and the faintest trace of fear began to creep back into her thoughts. Who was the figure? And why did it feel like the danger was closing in when they entered her chambers? The atmosphere was heavy with unspoken tension. Alara stood by the window, gazing out at the night sky. Her fingers ran over the smooth surface of the glass, but she couldn't focus. The world outside seemed so vast, yet it felt as if the walls of the palace were closing in on her. That man, he was here for a reason. Alex, she said, her voice soft but firm. I can feel it. Something's wrong. Alex stepped up beside her, his expression serious. Do you think he was part of the faction that wants to see you fall? He had heard the rumors, of course, the faction that had been pushing for her to be dethroned. The ones who thought her weakness made her unfit to rule. It wasn't hard to imagine that the stranger had come from that group. Alara nodded, her throat tight. I'm starting to think so. They've always believed I'm not strong enough to lead, but what if they're right? What if I'm not strong enough to face whatever comes next? No, Alex said, his voice firm. You are stronger than you know, Alara. them make you doubt yourself. You've already proven that. But Alara couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in her chest. The dangers she had already faced were only the beginning. She had spent so many years believing that if she could just survive the council's rejection, if she could just prove to them that she was worthy, everything would be fine. But now, she realized that it wasn't just about proving her worth. To the people who doubted her, it was about surviving the forces that wanted to tear her down entirely. Later that night, as Alara lay in bed, she could hear the soft murmurs of the palace outside her window. She couldn't sleep. The figure from the ball, the strange sense of impending danger, haunted her thoughts. She wasn't ready for what was coming, and what if it was already too late? The next morning, Alara woke to the sound of hurried footsteps in the hallway outside her chambers. Talon, her guardian, burst into the room, his face pale and his eyes wide with urgency. Alara, you need to come with me, he said, his voice shaking. It's about the faction. Their leader has made a move. They're preparing to strike. And you're their target. Alara's heart dropped. She had known it was coming. But the reality of it hit her like a storm. The faction wasn't just talking about her downfall anymore, they were taking action. And soon, they would come for her. Where's Alex? Alara asked. Her voice steadied despite the whirlwind of thoughts in her mind. He's already preparing. We need to leave the palace. Now, as they hurried down the corridors, Alara's mind raced. She had thought she was prepared for this moment. But now she understood just how little she truly knew about the battle that lay ahead. She was not just fighting for her throne, she was fighting for her survival. The people who rejected her were not the only enemies she had to face. The ones who wanted her to fall would stop at nothing to ensure that she never rose to power. And now, they were coming for her. The Hidden Truth Palace had always felt like a fortress. But now, it seemed more like a cage. Alara's heart raced as she followed Talon down the long, dimly lit corridors of the royal quarters. Every step they took felt heavier, the air thick with the weight of impending danger. Talon had explained the situation quickly, but it didn't matter. Alara didn't need all the details. She could feel the gravity of what was happening. They're moving against me, aren't they? Alara asked quietly, her voice tight with unease. She could already sense it in the way the palace guards were moving. The hushed conversations she overheard, the looks that people exchanged. There was no doubt anymore. Talon nodded, his face grim. Yes, Your Highness, the faction led by Lord Rail is rallying forces. It seems they've found a way to weaken your position. Something none of us saw coming. Alara's mind raced. She had known about the faction, the shadowy group of powerful nobles who had never believed in her rule. They had always doubted her because of her blindness and disability, but this was more than just disdain. This was a calculated effort to take her down. I need to know everything, Talon, Alara said, her voice unwavering despite the panic that threatened to rise within her. I need to know why they're after me. What do they know that I don't? Talon stopped walking, his eyes searching hers for a moment before he spoke. There's something they've discovered about your bloodline, princess, something ancient. Something that has been hidden from you and from the rest of your people. Alara felt a chill run through her. What do you mean? What could be hidden? Talon's gaze turned distant, and for a moment, Alara saw the flicker of something darker in his eyes. There are legends, Alara, old myths about the power your family once wielded. Powers that have been buried for centuries, but now someone has found out about them, about you. The fact that you carry this bloodline, it makes you more than just a princess. It makes you a key. Alara's heart skipped a beat. A key to what? To power, Talon said, his voice low. The kind of power that could reshape the entire galaxy. It's ancient. Something your ancestors once controlled, and the faction. They've found out that you have the potential to unlock it. Alara stood still, her mind racing. The weight of the words hit her like a tidal wave. She had always believed that her disability was her greatest challenge, that it was the reason she was rejected, but now, it seemed there was something far more dangerous about her, something she had never known about. And someone else, someone dangerous, was aware of it. Is this why they want to take me down? Alara whispered, because of this power, because I'm the last one who can control it. Talon nodded, yes, but they don't understand it. Alara, they don't know what you're capable of. But you need to understand something. This power could either save you or destroy you. And it's all tied to you. The moment they realize the truth, they will stop at nothing to control it. Alara felt a strange sense of fear mixed with something else, something she couldn't quite name. Power. Her bloodline was tied to power. The very thing that made her unfit to rule, the very thing that had led to her rejection, was also the very thing that made her a threat to those in power. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. We need to leave the palace, Talon said urgently, snapping Alara from her thoughts. They're already making their move. The faction will strike soon, and we can't stay here. Not with the guards compromised. But where will we go? Alara asked. Her voice steadied despite the swirling chaos inside her. I don't know. Who to trust anymore? The entire palace is crawling with enemies. I can't even trust the people who are supposed to protect me. Talon's face softened with sympathy. You can trust me, Your Highness, but we must go quickly. I know of a place, hidden deep in the mountains. It's a safe haven. From there, we can figure out how to fight back. As they made their way toward the hidden passage that would lead them out of the palace, Ilara's mind kept returning to the revelation, her family's legacy. The power that lay within her blood. She was not just the blind and disabled princess. She was the last of her line, the key to a force that could change everything. For the first time, she realized that her blindness wasn't her weakness, it was her strength. Because while the world saw her limitations, she had always seen things differently. Her true power wasn't in the physical sight she lacked, it was in the depth of her understanding. The way she could sense things that others couldn't. Her entire life had been spent in darkness, but now she was beginning to realize that darkness might just be the key to her future. The hidden passage opened before them, and Ilara felt a wave of relief. The cool air hit her face, carrying the scent of rain and earth. It was a small victory in a time of uncertainty, but it felt like a step towards something larger. They had escaped, but the danger wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. Talon led her down the narrow tunnel, and Ilara's mind raced. The truth was still out there, hidden from her, and the faction wasn't the only threat she had to worry about. Whoever had uncovered her family's secret knew more than they were letting on, and Ilara knew that the path ahead would be dangerous. But with Alex by her side and Talon guiding her, she wasn't alone. They had escaped the palace, but Ilara's journey was far from over. The battle for the throne, for her people, and for the power hidden within her blood was just beginning, and with each step, she could feel the weight of her destiny growing heavier. But now, she understood something she hadn't before. She wasn't just the princess who had been rejected. She was the last hope for a galaxy on the brink of change. And nothing would stand in her way. The awakening dense, mist-filled forest surrounded Ilara and Talon as they made their way deeper into the mountains. The once pristine halls of the palace were far behind them now, replaced by the eerie silence of the wilderness. It had been hours since they left the safety of the palace walls, but Ilara could still feel the pulse of danger pressing at her back. The shadows, once benign, now seemed to hold secrets, and every rustle in the underbrush made her muscles tense in response. The weight of the truth was heavy in her mind, but the uncertainty was even heavier. She wasn't just running from the palace now. She was running from something that she didn't fully understand, the power that lay dormant within her. The power that could either save or destroy everything she had ever known. Talon walked beside her, guiding her through the dense trees, but she could sense the growing concern in his every step. He was trying to protect her, but even he didn't know what they were up against. Ilara, too, was filled with uncertainty. How could she wield the power of her bloodline when she didn't even know what it truly was? And what would the world think of her once they found out? The thought made her feel even more isolated, even more fragile. She couldn't stop thinking about the figure she had seen in the palace, the shadowy figure at the ball. Her senses told her it wasn't just coincidence. Whoever he was, he knew more than he had let on, and if he knew about her bloodline, then the danger was even greater than she realized. Are we safe here? Ilara asked softly, breaking the silence between them. Talon paused, glancing around the dark forest. For now, but we cannot stay in one place for long. The faction will be looking for us. They will have eyes everywhere. We need to keep moving. Ilara nodded, though a sense of dread settled in her chest. She had hoped that fleeing would bring some relief, but instead, she felt more trapped than ever. The mountains were beautiful, yes, but they offered no comfort. They were just a hiding place, one that would only delay the inevitable. As they continued their journey, Ilara's mind returned to the power within her bloodline. She had spent her entire life believing she was incapable of leading, but now, it seemed like the very thing she had feared the most, the power that made her different, was the key to her survival. The question was, could she control it? And if she could, would it make her stronger? Or would it consume her? Suddenly, Talon stopped, his hand held up in front of her. Listen, he whispered, his voice tense. Ilara's heart skipped a beat. Her senses sharpened and she focused on the air around them. At first, there was only the wind, the rustle of leaves, but then she felt it, a presence. Someone was near. Someone was following them. Before she could say anything, Talon spoke again. Stay close, we're not alone. Ilara's mind raced. It wasn't just the faction that was after her now. The world around her was shifting and she couldn't tell who was friend or foe. Whoever was following them knew more about her than she realized. And it was no longer a question of whether they would find her, it was a question of when. Talon motioned for her to follow him off the trail and deeper into the trees. He moved silently, but Ilara could hear his breathing quicken with the tension. She had to trust him. She had to trust that he knew what to do. They reached a small clearing, Hidden by thick branches, Talon motioned for her to crouch low and they settled into the shadows. The presence she had sensed was getting closer, the footsteps growing louder. Ilara's heart raced in her chest, but she forced herself to stay still, to stay calm. She had to believe that they could make it through this. A figure stepped into the clearing, moving with the quiet precision of someone used to hunting. Ilara's pulse quickened as she realized it wasn't one of the palace guards. It was the figure she had seen at the ball. The mysterious man stood just a few feet away, his eyes scanning the area with an intensity that made Ilara shiver. She couldn't see much of his face beneath his hood, but the air around him felt thick with authority, with power. He was no ordinary stranger. Talon, Ilara whispered, her voice barely audible. Who is he? Talon didn't respond immediately, his hand resting on the hilt of a concealed weapon. He was preparing for a fight, but something in his expression told Ilara that he knew more than he was letting on. Stay down, Talon ordered softly. The stranger took another step forward, his gaze lingering in their direction. Ilara held her breath, praying that he wouldn't sense their presence. But then, to her surprise, the figure spoke. I know you're there, princess. The voice was low and cold, but there was an unmistakable familiarity to it. Ilara's heart sank. How had he known they were there? And how had he known who she was? I've been sent to bring you to Lord Rael, the man continued. Your bloodline is not a secret anymore. The time has come for you to fulfill your destiny. Talon's body tensed beside her, his hand tightening on the weapon. Ilara felt a surge of anger rise within her. She didn't want to be a pawn in someone else's game. She didn't want to fulfill anyone's destiny but her own. I will not go with you, Ilara said, her voice steady but full of defiance. The man's lips twisted into a cold smile. You don't have a choice, Lord Rael will come for you, whether you like it or not. Ilara could feel the power stirring within her, rising from deep inside her chest. It was a strange feeling, like a current running beneath the surface, waiting to burst free. She wasn't afraid anymore. The truth was out there now, her bloodline, her destiny. It was hers to decide. I won't run, Ilara said firmly, her voice stronger than it had ever been. I will face this. The stranger's smile faded, and for the first time, Ilara saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He wasn't expecting this resistance. He thought she would cower, but Ilara was done running. The princess who had once been rejected, who had once been afraid of her own power, was ready to embrace her destiny. With a swift motion, she stepped out from the shadows, facing the stranger with unwavering determination. If you want me, Ilara said, her voice cold, you'll have to fight for me. The stranger hesitated for a moment, but then a wicked smile spread across his face. So be it, princess, but know this, you're not the only one with power in this world. And what you've just awakened is only the beginning. Ilara's heart thundered in her chest, but she stood her ground. The battle was coming, and this time, she was ready. The final test. Forest around them had gone eerily quiet, the tense energy of the confrontation hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. Ilara stood tall, facing the mysterious figure who had threatened her with vague promises of power and fate. The words, what you've just awakened is only the beginning, echoed in her mind, fueling her determination. The unknown power inside her stirred, the sensation both thrilling and terrifying, as if it were waiting for her to unleash it. The stranger, still cloaked in shadow, took a slow step forward. His presence was commanding, but there was something unsettlingly familiar about the way he moved, calculated, confident, as though he had dealt with people like her before. He wasn't just an enemy, he was someone who understood the weight of what was at stake, and that made him even more dangerous. You think you can stand against me? Ilara said, her voice firm but calm. The power coursing through her veins felt almost far and raw, untamed, but there was no turning back now. She had to face this. Whatever this was. The stranger tilted his head, studying her with an almost amused expression. Oh, I don't want to fight you, princess, but I'm afraid you're out of options now. His hand brushed the side of his cloak, revealing a weapon sleek, sharp, and pulsing with an energy Ilara couldn't quite place. Talon moved to step in front of her, but Ilara stopped him with a simple gesture. Stay back, she whispered, her eyes locked on the stranger. This wasn't Talon's fight, it was hers. You're not afraid, are you? The man asked, a mocking grin curling his lips. You should be. The power you've unlocked, the power within you, it's not something you can control. It's a force too strong, too dangerous for someone like you to wield. Ilara's heart pounded in her chest, but her feet remained rooted to the earth beneath her. She was no longer the scared, isolated princess she had once been. The strength she needed was inside her, not in anyone else's hands. Maybe it's too strong for you, Ilara said, her voice steady. But not for me. The stranger's smile faltered, and for the briefest moment there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He hadn't expected this reaction, but that only fueled Ilara's confidence. She had spent her entire life being told what she couldn't do, what she wasn't capable of. Now, she was about to prove them all wrong with a sudden, sharp movement. The stranger lunged forward, the weapon in his hand crackling with energy, but Alara was ready. She felt the power within her surge forward in response like a wave crashing against the shore. The moment the weapon made contact, the energy in the air shifted. Alara's hands shot out in instinctive defense. And before she could fully understand what was happening, a blinding light enveloped the clearing. The stranger's weapon was knocked from his grasp. Flying into the air with a force that sent ripples through the forest, Alara's breath came fast. And her senses were on overdrive. She could feel the energy swirling around her, growing stronger. Pulsating like a living thing. Enough, the stranger shouted, regaining his composure and reaching into his cloak for something else. But Alara wasn't about to back down now. She had the power of her ancestors within her, and for the first time, she could feel its true potential. She raised her hand, and the air around her seemed to crackle with force. Her mind flashed with images, memories of ancient texts her ancestors had written, texts that spoke of the very power she now controlled. But it wasn't enough just to understand it. She had to trust herself. She had to trust her instincts. "You're wrong," Alara said, her voice loud and clear. As the energy within her surged once again, "I am the one who controls it, and I will control it." With that, she extended her hand toward the stranger. The ground beneath them rumbled, and a wave of energy shot out from Alara's fingertips, sending the man sprawling backward, his body slamming into a tree with a deafening crash. The force of the blow left him momentarily stunned, his breath ragged. For a moment, silence filled the forest, broken only by the distant sound of rustling leaves and the faint hum of energy still lingering in the air. Alara felt herself standing at the center of it all, a quiet storm of power, her heart racing as she realized the true scope of what she had just done. Talon stepped forward cautiously, his eyes wide. "Alara, did you just—" "I don't know," Alara said softly, her voice still filled with awe. "But it feels right." Her hands trembled slightly as the energy within her began to dissipate, and she could feel the exhaustion creeping in. Controlling the power had taken more out of her than she realized. The stranger groaned from the ground, slowly pushing himself to his feet. His cloak was torn, and the once imposing weapon was now a pile of metal and sparks at his side. His eyes were filled with anger, but also something else, fear. "You can't stop this," he spat, his voice low and full of venom. "The faction will find you. You will never be safe. The power you've unleashed will consume you, and they will use it against you." Alara stood tall, her stance unwavering. "No one will use me," she said, her voice filled with a quiet but fierce determination, "and no one will take this power from me." For the first time in her life, Alara didn't feel like a helpless princess. She felt like the ruler of her own destiny. The power that had once felt like a curse now seemed like a gift that could save not only her life but the future of Alara. She wasn't afraid anymore. With one final look at the stranger, who was now retreating into the shadows, Alara turned to Talon. "It's not over, is it?" Talon shook his head. "No, it's just the beginning. We've only just uncovered the surface of what they're planning." Alara nodded, the weight of responsibility settling over her once again. But this time, it didn't feel like a burden. She was ready to face whatever came next. The battle for her throne had just begun. But Alara knew one thing for sure: she wasn't going to face it alone. And no matter what powers tried to stop her, she would rise above them all. The blind and disabled princess had been underestimated for too long, but now, she was ready to show the galaxy what true strength really looked like, and no one could take that from her.